Good evening to my NBA family. It is such an incredible honor and pleasure for me to sit here as the new president of the National Bar Association. I first want to thank past President Kim Keenan for that magnificent and touching introduction. Indeed, when I think of this year, I think of ain't no stopping us now. There's no stopping the NBA. There's no stopping our NBA lawyers. There's no stopping our NBA jurists, who are the finest in the world, the 66,000 black lawyers that are out there. I'm so honored to represent you today, right now, at this time in history. And so for my theme this year for the National Bar Association, it is going to be, and it is, NBA, kneel for justice and stand up to fight. And why do I say that? Because at this time in history, more than ever, we need our African American lawyers to stand up to fight. Yes, we kneel for justice. As Lady Justice always says, in this country, the symbol of American justice. But our lawyers must stand up and fight. Stand up and fight. So before I get more into my vision for my year, I've got to thank those people whose shoulders I stand on. Starting with past president, immediate past president, Alfreda Robinson. The Reverend Jesse Jackson. You all know that I've had the pleasure of representing the Reverend Jesse Jackson, his family, Rainbow Push Coalition, this civil rights icon, this living legend, Jesse Jackson. I have to thank him because since I was a baby lawyer, he helped to shape my vision of the civil rights movement and how I could contribute. So thank you, Reverend Jackson. Justice Peggy Quince, thank you for being that trailblazing justice of the Florida Supreme Court. Justice Quince is now retired, but she was the first and only black woman to sit on the Florida Supreme Court and the only Chief Justice black woman to sit on that court to date. Justice Kimberly Esmond Adams from Atlanta, Georgia, Superior Court Judge. Outstanding, stellar judge, the best of the best that we have to offer in Georgia. Kim Keenan, I talked about Kim Keenan. What can I say about Kim Keenan? That she was one of the most extraordinary past presidents of the NBA. That she served as the general counsel of the NAACP for over 5 years. That she is just a magnificent lawyer, but most importantly, that she's a great friend. And then my family, my parents, my children, Ozzy and AJ, my children. There are many things that I do in life, but much of what I do is so that my children can live and so that I can set an example for them. And then when I think about the NBA and the role that it's played in my life, when I say I'm honored to serve, it's because I'm serving after such great, great, great leaders. And the history of this organization, this rich organization, that when I was in law school, I really thought that the National Bar Association was the mandatory bar, and the ABA and all those other associations were just voluntary bars. That's what I thought. That was a tradition, and that is why I have always loved the NBA, for its richness, what it gives, what we give to the membership. So, this is such an incredible honor for me, and to be here at this time when our country is facing three pandemics. COVID-19, police brutality, and election suppression. Those are three pandemics, not one, but three, linked together in this world and in this country. So we need black lawyers now more than ever. NBA lawyers out there standing up to fight in this country. So let me also say thank you to those incredible, all of the past presidents who have served before me, each and every one of you. Each and every one of you has played a role in this journey for me. I've learned from so many of you. Many of you know that I have a special relationship with some of the past presidents. But before I even get to the past presidents, I have to give a debt of gratitude to Willie Gary, Gloria Gary, and the entire Gary dynasty in Stuart, Florida. I learned and cut my teeth as a trial lawyer who refused to be denied from training with who I believe is one of the greatest trial lawyers of all time, and that's Willie Gary. And I thank him, I thank Gloria Gary, Lorenzo Williams, Jovita Williams, Sean Abney, the entire dynasty, Sekou Gary, for all that you all have given me over the years. I thank you. To the past presidents, I thank all of you, but there are a few that I have a special relationship with, and you all know that. And I have to thank Arthenia Joyner from Florida, Yvette Simmons, Beverly McCrary Smith. I talked about Kim Keenan, Alfreda Robinson, Pat and Mike Rozier, the dynamic duo family, H.T. Smith, Warren Dawson, Reggie Turner, our ABA president, who we're so proud of, we're serving simultaneously, Harold Pope out of Michigan, Joe Drayton, and Rodney Moore. I've got to thank you all in particular, even though I thank all the past presidents. I have a special relationship with you all. My team, and you'll see their pictures behind me, starting with my general counsel, David Green, who I've known since law school. Magnificent lawyer, magnificent professor, magnificent dean. North Carolina Central University School of Law is fortunate to have him, and I am so fortunate to have him and his team. He's going to have 5 or 6 deputy general counsels who are extraordinary, and you will get a chance to meet them. My chief of staff, you know Akua Kapak. You know Akua because she was there along with Shatori Bates to help me in my journey to victory as president of the NBA. And now she's continuing on as my chief of staff. The Judicial Council, I mentioned Judge Kimberly Esmond Adams. I also want to mention Myra Dixon from Atlanta, Tyranny Gundy. There's so many extraordinary, Thelma Cummings, Wyatt Cummings from Atlanta, whose shoulders I stand on, who played a role. Rhonda Trapp, San Diego. Denise Langford Morris out of Detroit. Craig Strong out of Detroit. Johnny out of Alabama. And of course, I talked about Peggy Quince. And there are close senior advisors that you will see in my administration. Ethel Isaacs Williams, her husband Clarence Williams, who was a former police chief out of Riviera Beach, who is going to be leading us when we look about police reform. He's going to be leading that charge. Tracy Poole at Johnson & Johnson. Leslie Fields, one of the foremost environmental lawyers in the country and in the world. Barbara Arnwine and Tanya Clayhouse, my election protection gurus. Barbara Wine invented, she is the mother of the election protection movement. And Tanya Clayhouse, we are so blessed to have them. And Rodney Bullard as well. And so I also have a group that I must acknowledge, young lawyers. I call them my children in the law. Chris Stewart, we see him on TV fighting the fight against police brutality, representing the families. Ron Watterson, extraordinary lawyer. Chris Chestnut, Dwayne Dickerson, Shatori Bates I mentioned. Sonia Natasha Brown from Atlanta, she's going to be the chaplain of the NBA. Brittany Allen, who's in my office, a young lawyer. LaWanda Hodges, former prosecutor also. These young lawyers, gifted lawyers, talented lawyers, and others, because I have a lot of others who are not practicing law, but who are in the public relations, public affairs field, who are consultants, who are part of my administration. So I talked about the 3 pandemics, ladies and gentlemen of the bar, of the National Bar Association, the 3 pandemics that are plaguing our nation and indeed the world. COVID-19, let's start with COVID-19. Why is COVID-19 one of the 3 pandemics that I'm going to tackle, that we're going to tackle at the NBA during my bar year? Well, because COVID-19 has disproportionately impacted African Americans in this country and our National Bar family. Disproportionately. In some communities, 80% of the victims who have died and who are impacted are African American. COVID is at front center of my administration. President Robinson has set a magnificent trail for me to just go right in and take it to the next level, because that's what my administration is going to do when it comes to COVID-19. And the Black lawyers mobilizing us so that we can find solutions. It's not enough for us to talk about it. It's not enough for us to do white papers. We have got to move into action, and we have already. So let me speak about that. 2 initiatives that you may be aware of. The National Bar Association, Rainbow Push Coalition, and some of you all know that I am chairperson of the board of the Rainbow Push Coalition. I am the first woman to ever serve in that capacity, and it's such an honor. The foremost civil rights organization, Rainbow Push Coalition, Reverend Jesse Jackson, its founding member and CEO. COVID, Rainbow Push Coalition, the National Bar Association, and the National Medical Association came together and formed this healthcare COVID manifesto. And now there are many, many, many other organizations that have joined, national and international organizations. This COVID manifesto is so important because why? COVID is a healthcare crisis. Above all, it is a healthcare medical crisis. So it's only fitting that the organization that represents the interests of 45,000 African American doctors in this country, who, by the way, are at the forefront of the fight for COVID. They are treating people in our community. They are treating those who people turn their backs on. They're at the forefront of this fight. Our black doctors, the best doctors, some of them in the country and in the world, are at the forefront, and we at the NBA have forged a historic alliance with them. And what does that mean with that alliance? Well, when it's come to issues of athletes, our athletes, African American boys and girls, in college and in high school, like my two boys who play varsity football, we need to be on point as African American lawyers taking a position, and as black doctors and Rainbow Push Coalition, these other organizations, about whether our children and young adults should be out there training and catching this virus in a way where they're having contact and when it's not possible to socially distance. We have to put in place, ladies and gentlemen, measures so that we can protect our community. That's just one of the many, many, many measures that this coalition group has executed, not just talking about it, but executed in the United States. So COVID, we know all the challenges. That's the number one pandemic. The number two pandemic in this country, police brutality, police reform, criminal justice reform, holding those accountable who are shooting and killing our black men in particular and black women in this country. We know as African American lawyers that that pandemic has been going on from time immemorial. All you have to do sometimes is just be black and just step out your door. And sometimes you feel that target on your back. Well, black lawyers, ladies and gentlemen, black lawyers are NBA lawyers at the forefront of that fight. What do I mean by that? We've seen, and I called him one of my children in the law, Chris Stewart, past president of the Gate City Bar Association, an affiliate chapter of the NBA, fighting. We see him on TV nationally, internationally, locally, fighting the fight, representing those families every single day. We see past president Ben Crump, and even before Trayvon Martin, Ben Crump and Darryl Parks were fighting the fight for the least of these who are being shot in this country. He's a past president of the NBA. So is Darryl Parks, past president of the NBA. We see others, Mr. Merritt, who's out there, Lonita Baker, who's out there fighting. Lonita Baker is a vice president of the NBA. And there's so many others throughout the country, locally, nationally, and internationally, who are fighting the fight against police brutality and holding them accountable. These are our NBA members and our NBA family that have been very, very active in our organization. We salute them. We applaud them. They got their training and grooming with the NBA. So we are there, but now as an institution, as an organization, we are rising and helping and supporting our membership so that we can hold accountable those who exercise and oppress and kill our men and women in law enforcement. When I say law enforcement, the law enforcement must be held accountable, those police officers. We applaud those district attorneys who are holding their feet to the fire, like Paul Howard in Atlanta, Georgia. So the second pandemic, police brutality, and holding those who are responsible in our community who have been doing this year in and year out accountable, changing the narrative and imposing and demanding, in fact, change throughout the nation, demanding that there are cameras that are worn, that are seen even before the arrest takes place, so there can be accountability so we know what happens. So we're not left to young people, teenagers, and children filming people who are dying every single day. The impact on a 17-year-old filming the death of someone because of the injustice is devastating to that child and to those who watch, just as it was devastating for us to watch all of those heroes who died so that we might live, so that Black lawyers might be able to fight, stand up and fight for justice. The third pandemic in this country is election suppression. I didn't say election protection. I said election suppression. That's a pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen of the National Bar Association, we have always been at the forefront of the fight to protect the right to vote. We know that Dr. King, Reverend Jackson, Andy Young, Congressman Lewis, and on and on and on, our leaders, Sonona Clayton, all of the women who were there on the front lines, fought and risked their lives so that we could have the right to vote, so there could be a civil rights in this country. We as Black lawyers have the duty, we cannot escape the duty, to protect the right to vote. People died so that we could vote. We must protect the right to vote. Election suppression is alive and well. Why do I say that? Because we know that, we live it, we breathe it. And if I could just take a moment of personal privilege, ladies and gentlemen, I voted in the primaries in Georgia recently. That was probably one of the most oppressive and difficult experiences that I've ever had. What should have taken 10 minutes, going in a polling station and voting down the street from my house, took almost 5 hours because the machines weren't working. They didn't have enough paper ballots to accommodate the long lines of people that were there. This is during COVID, during this pandemic we talked about that's killing people. So now we are at the polls and we're trying to socially distance. We're protected, we have masks, we have gloves, but we're having to wait for 5 hours to vote, to exercise our right to vote. No, sir, no, ma'am, no, no. So as Black lawyers, we must stand up again. Stand up and say no more. We must protect the right to vote. And the NBA already has coalition groups. Transformative Justice Coalition, Rainbow Push Coalition, the Urban League, NAACP, Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights, on and on and on, ACLU. We've got the mechanisms, we've got the partners. We just need, ladies and gentlemen, for each of you to stand up and say no more and protect the right to vote in your localities. We have already begun the training programs for our membership and others throughout the country. We have a 50-state-wide effort. We've identified the top most problematic jurisdictions where we know election suppression is alive and well. But I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, I saw it for myself. This is not an intellectual academic exercise. I lived it, I breathed it, and I escalated it up. I said, well, we're gonna put our money where our mouth is. I called the media because that doesn't make any sense. We're sitting in line, it's gonna take us 5 hours to vote. The machines aren't working. There's a reason for that. That's election suppression. Then we had the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights, Barbara Arnwine, Reverend Jackson, our coalition partners got together and we were able to escalate it up. And there was litigation that resulted. Ladies and gentlemen of the National Bar, we've got to be ready to fight. Just as with the police brutality for those who are protesting, those young men and women, as well as some of us who aren't as young, who are protesting and taking to the streets to protest the injustice, the discrimination, the violence, the continued violence against Black and brown people. We as lawyers must work to get them out of jail. Why? Because they're protesting so this country can be better, so we can stop this violence. And this violence is impacting our membership, our people, so it is only fitting for our lawyers to be the first in line to help get them out of jail. And that's what's happening throughout the country. I'm so proud when I see our NBA lawyers standing up, fighting for the least of these, for those who are protesting. And these protests, we see we are Black and white. It's that rainbow coalition that Reverend Jackson talked about when he ran in 1984 and 1988, when we were yelling, run, Jesse, run, Jesse, run. There was a coalition. And here today, we face that coalition. But Black lawyers, African American lawyers must stand up and be there to support those who are incarcerated for no reason because they just are exercising the right to protest peacefully. I'm not talking about the violent protest, the looting. I'm talking about those who are peacefully marching for a better tomorrow, to stop the violence, to stop the killing, in the name of George Floyd, in the name of Breonna Taylor, in the name of Rashad Brooks, in the name of all of those that preceded them who were killed violently by the police. We've got to have change. And for that change, we need our black lawyers. We need our black lawyers who are also legislators, members of Congress. We must step up, ladies and gentlemen. This is not the time for us to fall asleep. And so what am I asking of you? I've recognized those whose shoulders I stand on. I recognize the past presidents of this organization who have served so extraordinarily well. I've recognized our team. I've recognized those who I mentor. And I recognize, most importantly, this incredible membership of the National Bar Association. So as your president, what am I asking you to do? Because if we're going to walk the walk and talk the talk, we all have to do it. First, as the young folks say, stay woke. My kids had to tell me about that. Stay woke. What does that mean? What does it mean, translate? This is not the time for us to fall asleep at the wheel. It's not the time for us to say, oh, let somebody else do it. It's a time for all of us to stand up. We know that there are many in our community, the judges, many of them put their lives on the line every day for justice. Prosecutors, they put their lives on the line every day, some of them, for justice. We have thousands of lawyers in this country, talented, who need to step up and stay woke. Rise and stand. If you've been sitting down, if you've been thinking for somebody else, deferring to somebody else, it's time to rise. If you're retired, it's time to make some calls. And what do I mean by that? There's so many ways that you can serve with the NBA. You don't have to be on the front lines, but you can advise me. That's why I have a series of special advisors, people who have done it, who have been there, done that. Now it's our time to do it. Others need to step up to the plate. But even if you've been there and done that, there's a role for you too. Sign up for committees of the National Bar Association. Show your love. Give back to the National Bar. Continue to give back. So many have poured into this organization so that I could be here one day. And I stand here proud and ready to take on this challenge. Proud and ready to take on this challenge because as lawyers, we kneel for justice. What does that mean? We take the knee. Black lives matter. Black lawyers' lives matter. Black doctors' lives matter. Black folks' lives matter. All of our lives matter, but we kneel and say our lives matter for justice. Think of Lady Justice, the scales of justice. Lady Justice is blindfolded. Doesn't matter your color, justice. So we kneel for justice, but then we stand to fight. And this is going to be a fight. This is going to be a fight. And the reason why I've chosen 3 pandemics that are all lumped together is because if you, ladies and gentlemen, we know this and the National Bar stands for this, people's right to vote, people's right to speak truth to power, people's right to say enough is enough. And the way you do that is by voting. Not by sitting at home, but by voting. Yes, we pray. Yes, we form our organizations. Yes, we stand up for justice. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, the NBA, we must vote, and it's to black lawyers to protect the right to vote. So in sum, I'm going to repeat. A luta continua. Victoria es cierta. The struggle continues, and victory is certain. The struggle continues, and victory is certain. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you. I say prayers every day that this phenomenal organization will continue to lead the way with these 3 pandemics: COVID, police brutality and reforms, and election suppression, because it is up to black lawyers, African American lawyers, to lead this country to a better day. And I'm honored to lead you all to that place. Thank you, God bless you, and just remember, the struggle continues.